This is episode 13 of a series where we examine the cut content, design, and development of Fallout 3. During the quest Galaxy News Radio, the player collects a relay dish from the Museum of Technology, then installs it on top of the Washington Monument. Afterwards, the audio quality of the GNR radio station improves and you can tune into it across the entire wasteland. The official guide mentions that after riding the elevator up to the top of the monument, the player has the option to either affix the dish or pass a science check to both affix the dish and boost the signal. The latter option is notably missing in-game, however, but it seems that originally only players who had a high science skill would get the benefit of hearing the station across the entire wasteland. On one hand, I can definitely see why it was cut, but on the other, I think this would have been a nice reward for players who focused on their science skill. Speaking of the Museum of Technology, one of the texture sheets for the area has unused signs for transport and robotics exhibits, but there are no exhibits like this in the final location. Perhaps most interesting of all is the mention of a rooftop exit, something that definitely doesn't exist in the final game, as the roof wasn't even placed. The location cells use the suffix new, implying the entire area was reworked at some point in development, but unfortunately the old cells were deleted, so its original iteration will always remain a mystery. While Bethesda's previous entry Oblivion featured long-range combat, it's significantly different than the gunplay in Fallout 3. During F3's documentary, developer Gavin Carter recounted how they reworked the combat system. The first thing we did was, we took a bow and arrow from Oblivion and we made a bow and arrow gun that shot rapid-fire arrows. And it didn't quite work right. So we had to build that whole system from scratch. The hardest part has definitely been how you do gun combat within an RPG. How your stats affect your aim, affect your damage. We've been over that hundreds and hundreds of times. How much the guns spread, how much damage they do, and trying to make you feel like you're getting better as you get more powerful. This machine gun bow was apparently deleted as well, which is too bad because it would have been a fun weapon to play around with. There's a very ugly cut fire escape, and it seems to have been one of the very first models Bethesda added into the game. This was apparently cut extremely early as the texture still has a template overlaid on top of it. There's an unused inventory icon for turpentine, and likely due to an oversight, the item uses the generic junk image instead. There's an unused model called Fly Meat that doesn't have a GEC entry, which was presumably going to be dropped by bloatfly enemies. In the final game, bloatfly meat reuses the ant meat model instead, and I can definitely see why, considering this is probably one of the worst looking models in the game. Ant resin is a miscellaneous item dropped by giant ants, and while the item does appear, its original purpose seems to have been cut. It uses the prefix MS02, revealing that it was once a part of the side quest The Superhuman Gambit. Perhaps it was originally a quest item that was cut and later recycled as a junk item. There's quite a few pre-war books that strangely went unused, but all of them would later appear as junk items in New Vegas. The stim pack used in-game uses the dirty texture, but there's an unused clean texture as well, suggesting they might have planned to include multiple types of stim packs that had varying degrees of healing effects. It's possible these just would have been used as a prop too, though. There's an unused Pip-Boy icon for leather armor that has no stubble and a smaller shoulder piece. Workbenches are used to create custom weapons, assuming the player has schematics and the required items. However, there's some interesting notes in the official guide that imply they once had more utility. If you have a high repair skill, the Forge's workbench is an exceptional place to fix or build weapons and armor. There is also a workbench for repairing or building weapons. Of course, you can't craft armor or repair items at workbenches in the final game, but perhaps they originally had that functionality as well. Dr. Barrows runs Underworld's chop shop, and at one point there was going to be a cut note there written by him that states, "In my 7 years studying the ghoul anatomy, I discover more and more evidence to support my theory on the nature of the not radiological human, or ghoul as they are commonly called. In summary, I theorize that our unnaturally long lifespan is due to a mutation within the autonomic nervous system of certain individuals, following exposure to specific combinations of ionizing radiation with wavelengths below 10 picometers. This mutation, it seems, disrupts the normal process of decay in the neurotransmitter along the spinal cord. Specifically, the transmitters affected are those responsible for cardiac and respiratory function in a healthy human. According to my studies, these transmitters are continually regenerated after mutation, carrying sufficient oxygen to sustain life of the subject while being insufficient to retain skin elasticity and avoid necrosis, the result of which is the corpse-like appearance of the post-mutation humans. It should be noted that exposure to radiation typically results in sickness followed by death, and the X factor that will lead to mutation upon exposure in lieu of the typical outcome remains unknown to this researcher. In the coming months, I will be assembling my findings on this subject into a full study. There's 2 very interesting test areas that were seemingly made by Grant Struthers, an artist who worked on the game's special effects and gore. The first is a normally inaccessible world space called Test Grant World, and you can check it out by typing in COC-T Grant World into the console. There are several pieces of a building kit that are only used in this world space. The mesh isn't finished, and maybe there just wasn't time to complete it. This building looks really cool, and it's too bad it wasn't used to decorate the world. There's another version of this building that isn't placed anywhere in the game either, but I placed it here to show it off. There's some interesting special effects in front of that building that cycle on forever in a place most players will never explore. Another section of the ruins contains a force field and several destroyed vehicles. Behind the ruins is a highway overpass and water that stretches out to the horizon. There's some other interesting oddities here too, like a vertibird not far from an irradiated pool of water. One of the cells here is named Water Walk, and X markers seem to imply this was used to test effects as an NPC moves through water. The other is a cell called Test Grant Interior, and you can travel here by typing in COC-T Grant INT. One room has blood dripping down from the ceiling onto the floor, an exploded super mutant burning in eternal flames, and a few disembodied body parts, some of which are floating. In another room, there's a plasma rifle, a glowing one, and some floating circuitry. One of the rooms and a nearby hallway were also used to test igniting gas. All of the other rooms were seemingly used to test particle and lighting effects. Some of these changes, particularly more exhibits at the Museum of Technology, would have made Fallout 3 into an even better game. Ultimately though, all of this was left on the cutting room floor.